Before the divers went in, the Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax put out a single line in an official telex. It said the object was not an aircraft, not a flare, not a float, and not any known object. That sentence went into a Government of Canada file. The file used the words, unidentified flying object. The date was October 4th, 1967. The place was Shag Harbour, Nova Scotia, and whatever came down that night has never been identified.
It was 11:20 in the evening, Atlantic Daylight Time on October 4, 1967. Shag Harbour is a small fishing village on the southern tip of Nova Scotia, population a few hundred. The night was clear and moonless. At least 11 people independently observed a large, low-flying object with bright lights moving toward the water. Witnesses reported hearing a sound like a whistling bomb, then a whoosh, then a loud bang as the object made contact with the surface of the Atlantic. Local resident Lori Wickens was driving Highway 3 with 4 friends when they pulled over and watched the object floating 250 to 300 meters offshore, its lights still showing. Wickens drove to a phone booth and called the RCMP, reporting a plane crash. The RCMP constable did not immediately believe him. By the time Wickens returned to the shore with police, the lights had gone out. The object had begun to sink. No aircraft were reported missing. No boats were unaccounted for. The RCMP launched boats within the hour. Fishermen followed. What they found was not wreckage. It was a patch of yellow-orange foam, at least 80 feet wide and 120 by 300 feet across, sitting 4 to 6 inches thick on the surface of the Atlantic. No debris, no bodies, no fuel slick.
3 witnesses stand out in the record because they represent entirely separate vantage points, independent of one another, with no way to coordinate their accounts before they were separately reported to authorities. Lori Wickens was a local resident. He was driving Highway 3 through Shag Harbour with 4 friends on the night of October 4th, 1967, when he spotted a large object descending toward the water. He pulled over and watched it float approximately 250 to 300 meters offshore, its lights still on. He drove to the nearest phone booth and called the RCMP detachment at Barrington Passage. "We went right to the phone booth and called the RCMP and reported a plane crash," Wickens later told researchers. "He didn't believe me at first, so I hung up. But he had gotten the number for the phone booth, so as I made my way back to my car, the phone rang. He wanted to know where the crash was, and we told him to meet us. As we were going back there to meet him, we could see the light drifting in the water, and then we watched the light until it went out." Ralph Lowinger was in the air. He was co-piloting a cargo aircraft from New York to London at the same hour, cruising altitude, when he spotted the object from the cockpit. He described a formation of bluish-white lights, slanted from upper left to lower right, that he initially took for another large aircraft on a collision course. "The captain's hands and my hands both went for the control yoke, because we figured we were going to have to dodge this thing," Lowinger said. "The lights held position, did not cross their flight path, and then descended." He filed a report. Captain Leo Howard Mercy was at sea. He was standing at the wheelhouse of his fishing vessel near Halifax when his Deca radar showed 4 stationary blips. He looked up and visually confirmed 4 bright objects in a roughly rectangular formation in the sky. His crew of nearly 20 fishermen came on deck and watched alongside him. Mercy radioed the Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax and the harbor master and filed a formal report with the Lulenburg RCMP detachment upon returning to port. Ground, air, sea. No contact between the 3. Each account corroborates the others on the key details: multiple lights, structured formation, low-altitude descent toward the water. The RCMP received all 3 reports within hours of each other. The documentary record for Shag Harbour is unusually complete for a 1967 incident. It begins at 13:20 Zulu on October 5, 1967, the morning after the event, with a priority telex from the Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax to Canadian Forces Headquarters. The subject line is UFO report. The telex confirms that a dark object, more than 60 feet across, was observed descending into the water at Shag Harbour on the night of October 4. It states explicitly that all conventional explanations have been ruled out. Not an aircraft, not a flare, not a float, not any known object. That ruling came from a preliminary investigation completed overnight. Canadian Forces Headquarters responded the same day, directing Canadian Maritime Command to conduct an underwater search as soon as possible.
A second priority telex went to the Fleet Diving Unit Atlantic, ordering the Coast Guard cutter at Shelburne to provide a vessel and divers for a search and recovery operation. The Canadian naval vessel HMCS Granby joined the effort. Professional Navy divers worked the site for 3 days, from October 5 through October 8, 1967. The physical evidence at the surface was the yellow-orange foam. It measured at least 80 feet across and covered a patch approximately 120 by 300 feet. It was 4 to 6 inches thick. It had no conventional explanation. It dissipated. The divers found nothing below the surface. No wreckage, no structural material, no fuel, no personal effects, no evidence of any aircraft or vessel. The search was concluded on October 8th with no recovery. The case was documented in Department of National Defense files, archived at Library and Archives Canada under RG 77, Volume 310, Microfilm Reel T1744. The United States Condon Committee, the Air Force commissioned academic review of unexplained aerial phenomena, included Shag Harbour as case number 34 in its final report published in 1968. The committee's finding was unexplained. That conclusion has not been revised by any government since.
The official position of the Government of Canada has not changed. The object was never identified. Canadian forces investigated and found no conventional explanation. The Condon Committee reviewed the case and reached the same conclusion. The file remains open. No aircraft were reported missing on the night of October 4, 1967 in the area of Shag Harbour. No military vessel or submarine was reported unaccounted for. The foam at the scene was consistent with an object entering the water at speed, but its composition was never definitively analyzed in surviving records. What the official record does not cover, why, if the Navy conducted a 3-day underwater search with professional divers and modern detection equipment, no wreckage was ever located. Objects that crash into water leave debris, they leave fuel, they leave structural material. A 60-foot dark object that hit the surface hard enough for 11 people to hear a loud bang on shore left nothing for the divers to find. The official record does not explain that. It simply notes that the search concluded and the case is unresolved. 3 theories have circulated among researchers since 1967. The first is a Soviet submarine or experimental craft. The Cold War was active. Soviet vessels operated in the North Atlantic. If a classified Soviet asset had gone down, neither government would have advertised it. But a submarine sinking at that speed would leave debris, and Soviet records released after 1991 contain no record of a loss in that area on that date. The second is a conventional meteor or bolide. A large meteor entering the atmosphere at low angle can produce light, sound, and a water impact. But witnesses described the object moving horizontally under controlled flight before descending. And a meteor does not float on the surface with lights showing before sinking. The third theory, held by many researchers, is that the object was not from here, that the controlled descent, the structured lights, the clean disappearance, and the absence of any recoverable material points to something operating on principles that do not produce conventional wreckage. That claim has no physical evidence to support it beyond the absence of any other explanation. What is documented is this: something 60 feet across came down into Shag Harbour on a clear October night in 1967. 11 people watched it. The government sent divers. The divers found nothing. The file is still open. Case files every night at tinfoilfools. The full archive is on Instagram. Subscribe for the next file.